$75 billion, one single corporate milestone this month, not the cumulative total of the entire industry, mind you, just one company hitting the public market. Welcome back to SAIIRA. I'm Sai.
And I'm Ira. But honestly, Sai is completely right to lead with the sticker shock. June 2026 genuinely broke the scale. We are looking at two historic IPOs, a sweeping federal AI bill, a safety lab begging the world to slow down while hunting for billions, and a massive shift in how the tech giants are defending their partnerships.
It is a wild landscape. In episode 1, we warned you that things move fast, but I don't think either of us expected the industry to move quite this fast.
To be fair, I don't think the people running these companies expected it either. Movements that were supposed to take years of strategic planning just played out in a matter of weeks.
Exactly. So let's not waste a single frame. We have a completely packed running order, and we start with the biggest, heaviest number on the board. Let's talk SpaceX, the largest IPO in history. $75 billion raised, priced at $135 a share. Ira, set the scene for everyone trying to parse the math here. How does an aerospace company suddenly clear a software multiplier valuation?
It comes down to a very clever corporate restructuring. Back in February, Elon Musk merged xAI, the entity behind Grok, directly into SpaceX. One roof, one stock ticker. You get reusable rockets, Starlink satellites, and frontier artificial intelligence wrapped in a single bundle. The pitch to Wall Street was simple. This is the most vertically integrated tech empire on Earth.
Which sounds incredible on a pitch deck, but what does the actual enterprise adoption data look like under the hood?
That's where the narrative shows some serious structural stress. If you look at over 400 documented federal AI deployments where the vendor is explicitly named, OpenAI holds 234 contracts. Do you know how many xAI's Grok has captured?
Let me guess. A patriotic, highly publicized 10?
3 Sai, 3 individual deployments, and that's despite xAI pricing Grok at a highly competitive 42 cents per million tokens to attract public sector interest.
Wait, 3 out of 400? That is a massive red flag if your goal is convincing public markets that your proprietary AI architecture is worth hundreds of billions on its own merits. So, where is their actual AI revenue coming from?
Here's a fascinating bit of industry trivia. xAI is currently acting as an infrastructure landlord. They are subleasing time on their massive, liquid-cooled Colossus supercomputer cluster in Memphis to competing foundational labs.
They are subleasing their computing power to their direct rivals?
That's the reality, which means xAI's most reliable near-term AI revenue stream relies on a bizarre premise. Please keep succeeding so you keep renting our hardware, even though our official corporate mission is to defeat you. It's a deeply strange hedge.
It feels like Starlink is the actual economic engine here, and the AI narrative was hastily bolted on just to clear the valuation ceiling for the IPO. But while xAI is focused on rapid scaling, Anthropic is taking a completely opposite approach to its public positioning. On June 1st, they filed confidential S1 paperwork with the SEC for an IPO. Yet, just days later, their safety team published a deeply technical policy paper titled When AI Builds Itself. Ira, walk us through what they are actually claiming in this paper.
The data they shared is quite striking. Anthropic revealed that their Claude models now autonomously write and merge over 80% of the production code in Anthropic's own internal repositories. Furthermore, on SWE Bench Pro, the benchmark testing models on complex, real-world software engineering bugs, Claude's success rate leaped from 25% to 76% in just 6 months. Because of this trajectory, Anthropic warned that we are rapidly approaching the threshold of recursive self-improvement, where software builds its own successors.
And their formal recommendation to Washington was that the world needs to prepare a verified, multilateral, pause button framework for frontier models. Ira, let me ask you straight. How can you file regulatory paperwork to raise tens of billions of dollars from Wall Street while simultaneously publishing an essay warning that the tech is so dangerous it might require a global shutdown? You have to pick a lane.
I completely see why it looks like a corporate paradox. But if we look at their argument closely, it's rooted in classic Cold War non-proliferation game theory. Co-founder Jack Clark argued that Anthropic cannot unilaterally pause development because it wouldn't actually reduce catastrophic global risk. It would simply cede the technological lead to less safety-conscious competitors. So their logic is, we need the capital to stay in the race, but we want a universal treaty that binds everyone equally.
Sure, but that is also the perfect corporate defense mechanism. It allows you to look like the ethical adult in the room while continuing to build at absolute maximum speed. Though their argument for absolute operational control took a bit of a hit when technical logs of an unreleased Claude 3.8 Sonnet model leaked onto developer forums the exact same week, right?
Keeping secrets in Silicon Valley is notoriously difficult, even for a safety lab. It certainly undercuts the authority of the message. It is tough to argue you are ready to guide humanity through recursive self-improvement when your own upcoming models are leaking out onto internet forums ahead of schedule.
Let's transition to the enterprise layer, where we are seeing some highly calculated passive aggression. Let's talk about Microsoft. They have historically invested $13 billion into OpenAI and have been their primary cloud partner. They are ostensibly best friends, right?
Best friends who sleep with a physical copy of their termination clauses under their pillows. At their recent Build conference, Microsoft quietly unveiled an entirely native proprietary model family called the MI series. The initial releases include a highly efficient 5 billion parameter model called MAI Code 1 Flash and a 35 billion active parameter mixture of experts model called MAI Thinking 1. Crucially, these were trained completely from scratch on Microsoft's own commercially licensed datasets, with no data distillation or architecture borrowed from OpenAI.
That is a massive development. It's essentially a corporate insurance policy. Microsoft isn't breaking its alliance with OpenAI, but they are demonstrating to the market and to their partner that dependency is entirely optional. Ira, what are the actual performance and cost metrics on these internal models? Why would an enterprise switch?
The technical efficiencies of MAI Code 1 Flash are a massive deal for enterprise budgets. It features an adaptive response length mechanism that adjusts internal reasoning steps based on the difficulty of the prompt, allowing it to solve coding problems using up to 60% fewer tokens. On SWE Bench Pro, it achieved a 51.2% success rate. For large enterprises running millions of automated developer queries on Azure, switching to a hyper-cheap in-house model represents a catastrophic revenue loss for OpenAI.
It's a textbook pincer maneuver. Why rent a brain from Sam Altman when you can grow a cheaper one in your own data center? And this connects straight back to the internal leaks we covered, where Microsoft management instructed their engineering teams to aggressively curb spending on external tools due to compounding API costs.
Exactly. The interesting part is never the routine product announcement. The interesting part is always who the strategy is aimed at. Which brings us directly to Cupertino. Apple just concluded its Worldwide Developers Conference, and it opened with Tim Cook's final major keynote before his planned retirement this September. Once the emotional dust settled from his farewell, the engineering documentation dropped. Sai, what did we discover about the infrastructure of Apple Intelligence?
This is the ultimate corporate compromise, Ira. Apple, a company whose entire modern brand identity is built on absolute vertical integration, owning the hardware stack, and the strict promise that your personal data stays on device, explicitly confirmed that the back-end infrastructure for the new contextual Siri runs on NVIDIA custom silicon, hosted inside Google Cloud data centers.
Wait, let's pause there. Google Cloud?
Google Cloud. The legendary walled garden didn't just open its gates, it leased the master bedroom to its primary structural rivals. It proves that despite Apple's deep financial reserves, scaling a competitive frontier model on their own localized hardware timeline was impossible. They had to capitulate to the existing cloud infrastructure duopoly.
It really highlights that in 2026, software capability is just vanity, infrastructure capacity is sanity. The apps get the consumer hype, but the companies managing the physical infrastructure, the silicon, the liquid cooling, and the data centers are capturing the sustainable margins.
Let's look at how this infrastructure power dynamic is hitting consumer devices. OpenAI just rolled out Dreaming V3 to all Plus and Pro ChatGPT accounts. Ira, what exactly changes for the end user when they open the app now?
This shifts their memory system from an explicit opt-in model to an asynchronous background process. In previous versions, you had to explicitly tell the system what to retain. Now, Dreaming V3 runs an evaluation loop after your chat sessions conclude, automatically extracting context, preferences, and project details to build a permanent user profile. A recent independent data privacy audit found that roughly 96% of the metadata stored in these new ChatGPT memory files was generated automatically by the AI's internal classification systems rather than requested by the user.
That is a wild ratio. It provides a seamless user experience, sure, but it definitely raises some important data governance questions. And that leads nicely into our mailbag. Carlos from Austin writes, if my chatbot is autonomously building a profile of me in the background, should I be concerned about data privacy or just enjoy the productivity boost? Ira, how would you answer Carlos?
Carlos, I think it's a balance. The productivity gains are real, but it's important to remember that these models are corporate products. The real shift will happen over the next year as regular consumers discover just how detailed these automated profiles have become. My advice to you, Carlos, is to enjoy the utility, but regularly check your privacy and memory settings to ensure you are comfortable with what the system is retaining. Sai, how would you handle it?
I'm a bit more casual about it for my public workflows, but for sensitive design projects, I turn background memory off entirely. Speaking of data governance, this massive scale of data collection is exactly why we are seeing a coordinated regulatory response in Washington. Representatives Jay Obernolte and Lori Trahan just introduced a 269-page discussion draft called the Great American AI Act of 2026. Ira, what is the main point of friction in this bill?
The most debated element is a mandatory 3-year federal preemption clause. Right now, states like Colorado have enacted quite strict, specific laws protecting citizens against algorithmic bias in critical areas like housing and employment. If the Great American AI Act passes, it would temporarily freeze those state-level laws. The tech industry argues that a single national standard is vital because navigating 50 different state compliance structures slows down innovation. However, civil liberties groups worry that a federal law might establish a lower standard of accountability than the state laws it is replacing.
At the same time, the executive branch is exploring an entirely different approach to governance. The Trump administration recently signed a national security executive order focused on AI defense integration. And background briefings reveal that policymakers are exploring a mechanism for the federal government to take direct equity stakes in leading private American AI labs like Anthropic and OpenAI. What makes this fascinating from a political perspective is that Senator Bernie Sanders published an op-ed the exact same week advocating for a very similar structural outcome from the progressive left. Ira, how did we land on an ideological horseshoe alignment like this?
Their objectives are completely different, of course. The administration views equity through a national security lens, ensuring the state has direct oversight and a stake in technologies critical to geopolitical competitiveness. Senator Sanders views it through an economic justice lens, arguing that because these models were built using public data and federally funded academic research, the public deserves a financial dividend from the corporate upside. It's two entirely different philosophies landing on the exact same mechanism. the state holding a seat at the corporate table of frontier AI.
If you told us a few years ago that federal equity stakes in private software startups would be a serious bipartisan discussion point in Washington, it would have sounded completely improbable. Today, it's an active policy exploration. Before we wrap up, we have to talk about a major development that occurred just days ago. On June 14th, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella published a remarkably candid, long-form essay on X titled "A Frontier Without an Ecosystem is Not Stable." It instantly accumulated over 28 million views and has completely reframed how the industry talks about enterprise value. Ira, Nadella introduced two very specific concepts here: human capital and token capital. What is the distinction he's drawing?
This is a vital architectural shift in how Microsoft is positioning itself, Sai. Historically, enterprise software amplified human productivity. You bought a tool, your employees used it, and your company created unique value. Nadella argues that AI fundamentally alters this because frontier models have the capacity to absorb human expertise and commoditize it. If a company blindly feeds its unique operational workflows into a central external model, it turns its proprietary capabilities into a standardized service available to any competitor.
Right, he explicitly wrote, "The last thing any of us want is a world where every company across every sector is ceding value to a few models that eat everything they see." That is an incredibly direct statement from the CEO of the company bankrolling OpenAI. What historical parallel did he use to back that up?
He pointed directly to the first phase of macro globalization. He noted that while global GDP numbers looked completely healthy on the surface during that era, the aggressive outsourcing of industrial activity permanently hollowed out entire local economies and communities. He warned that there is no societal permission for an AI future that repeats this mistake by hollowing out the cognitive and operational expertise of non-tech industries.
So, what is Microsoft's actual technical advice to enterprise clients to prevent their corporate moats from being absorbed?
He is telling companies that true organizational value cannot come from simply subscribing to an external API. Instead, an enterprise must construct its own proprietary learning loops on top of infrastructure. Your human capital, the judgment, context, and creativity of your staff, must actively guide and reinforce your own internal token capital, which is the custom AI capabilities and agentic systems that your organization uniquely owns and controls. Nadella's core technical argument is that an enterprise must be able to completely swap out the underlying foundational model without losing the company veteran expertise embedded in their custom learning system.
It's an interesting moment because Elon Musk actually replied to the post calling it interesting. And market analysts point out that this public stance aligns perfectly with why Microsoft is actively shifting its enterprise strategy from promoting external foundation models to telling clients, own your own stack, protect your intellectual property, and don't let a handful of models absorb your corporate moat. It really shows that the entire ecosystem is maturing. From SpaceX's massive market cap expansion and Anthropic's push for verified safety frameworks, to Microsoft's MAI development, Apple's cloud collaboration, and Satya Nadella's explicit warning about token capital, every major player is trying to establish a sustainable, sovereign position for the long haul.
The industry is transitioning from an experimental phase into a highly structured institutional era.
You can find our full technical citations, show notes, and transcripts over at SAIIRA Show. I'm Sai.
And I'm Ira.
This is SAIIRA, Signal in the AI Noise. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.